Good morning and welcome to Norcal PTAC's webinar, first in a webinar series on how to do business with the government. My name is James Forrest. I'm the host for today. I'm the program coordinator for Norcal PTAC. I'll talk about what PTAC is in a second. We're very lucky to have Thomas Burns today. He is one of our excellent procurement specialists with Norcal PTAC. He's going to take the main presentation. I'm going to take this first part here. So what is a PTAC? PTAC stands for a Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We are a program on a federal level of a whole national network of nonprofits. So PTAC programs are not part of the government. We're not government agencies. We are also not for-profit entities. So we're not trying to market or sell anything to you. Everything we do for you is for free. And so we really just want to help get the word out that there's more opportunity in the government marketplace than a lot of folks might realize for small businesses. So there's 96 PTACs across the country. You can see here on the right, this is a map of California, where as you can see, there's 7 PTACs altogether already. And I believe that's plus the American Indian PTAC, which covers a number of different states in the West. So we are just one of 7. You can see our service area here. I'll go over Norcal PTAC in a little more detail. If you're in another one of these counties, then you can apply for them instead of us. So I'll talk about what it means to apply to be a client in a second. But everyone, all of our PTACs in the whole country, we have the same goal, which is to help businesses compete and succeed in the government marketplace. That's what we do. We provide our services at no cost. We get grants from the federal, state, and local governments. So that's how we make it run. We don't take money from you, so we're not going to be asking for a client service fee. A little bit of data here. In the fiscal year 21, so pretty recently, PTACs served over 56,000 clients nationwide and helped them win more than 24 billion with a B, 24,000 million contracts for prime and subcontractors with the government. So that's pretty amazing. And we're very happy to be contributing our slice of the pie here. In 2021, we helped our clients win more than 500 million, so $500 million in contracts alone in just this one PTAC center. So we are pretty proud of our work in helping our clients. We're pretty passionate about getting small businesses onto this track for success, but we're not going to push you into it. Government contracting is not for everybody. Tom's is going to go over that a little bit, and it's something you want to do when you're ready. But we do want folks to know that if you're in the right place, don't overlook contracting. So Thomas will be talking a little bit more about that. Before I hand things over, I just want to be a little more specific about what PTAC does to help our clients. Sure, okay, we help our clients, but what does that actually mean? Well, for the first thing, I'm going to skip to the third bubble here. You can tell we're putting on resources and trainings because you're in a webinar that we're running today. So this is something that we do on a regular basis. We put on these free webinars, and they're available for anyone to join from anywhere. So we had Chantal from New Mexico, and we have Charlotte, North Carolina. We've got some folks joining from around the country. That is totally fine. Everybody can learn something from us here today. And these are always free, always open for everybody. But the bread and butter of what we do, Norcal PTAC, is one-on-one counseling. So Thomas Burns is one of our procurement specialists. We have a small team of them, and what they do is they meet individually with clients who apply and are assigned to them. And they can go over just about any topic related to government contracting. I'll show you the next slide. We can go over some of the topics that we can help you with. But really, I mean, if it's related to contracting, cradle to grave, we can assist with it. We don't assist with financing. We don't help with loans. We don't help with grant applications. And we don't work with nonprofits or if your business isn't set up yet. So you have to have an established business and be looking to get into contracting and for a very specifically contracting topic, but we can help with just about anything within that sphere. For our clients who do apply, we can also hook you up with a bid matching profile. That thing is pretty neat. Basically what it does is it scours the whole internet and finds bid opportunities that match a criteria that you set up with your procurement specialist. So you're going to sit down and pick out some codes, some keywords that describes what you sell. And then bid matching will send what it thinks that might be useful for you. It's really nice to wake up every morning with an email in your inbox with a list of opportunities that you can click on, hyperlinked and everything, and it will bring you to that bid opportunity. And you can ask yourself if this is something your business can bid on successfully. And then talk to your procurement specialist about it, because that's what they're here for. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, norcalptac.org is our website. And if you were in another one of those counties, or God forbid another state entirely, well, that's totally fine. We have PTACs all across the country. Like I said, 96 PTACs, 7 or 8 just in California alone. So the website is aptac-us.org. Find a PTAC. Some of the things that, as I mentioned, we can cover just about anything related to contracting. We're not joking. So if you need help with your SAM registration, this should say UEI. DUNS is actually phased out now. We can help with any sort of certifications, socioeconomic certifications, disabled veteran, you name it. We're crafting capability statements, we do market research, how to market yourself to government agencies, propose reviews, host award support even. We can connect primes and subs together, that's a big issue. GSA schedules, that's an enormously complex sort of endeavor if you're getting into that. SBIR, STTR, that's the one exception to our no grants rule. We can, technically the SBIR program is a grant program. We can assist with that as well. And really just anything related to federal, state, local, or even tribal contracting. So please do get in contact with us or your local PTAC if you're interested. We are here to help. And as I mentioned, we're not a for-profit entity. We're not a government program, so we can really relate to you trying to get through all this red tape and help your business succeed. All right, that is my spiel. Thanks for being patient with me. And I'm really excited to have Thomas Burns give the first presentation of this How to Do Business with the Government series that we're starting. It's going to be every month. So if you have a friend that you think might benefit from this, have them go ahead and join next month in May. You can find them on the calendar. All right, Thomas, I'm going to free you here and ask you to start your video and unmute. And take it away. Thomas has decades of experience and you're in great hands with him. So thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Burns. And I'm really a fan of the small business community. For over 20 years, I've enjoyed working with small businesses, also being an entrepreneur. My specialty really focused on sales and marketing, business planning, and providing my clients with assistance in looking for government contracts. Did my basic 4 years, and basically I got into being an entrepreneur because at one point I was working in the hotel industry in customer service, and just kind of gravitated towards sales and loved it. And that turned into a 20-year career providing sales and marketing to the small business community. And really quick, I want to do a disclosure because things change a lot. They change sometimes overnight. And so the information that we're providing is accurate to the best of my ability at this time of the presentation. Some or all of the provisions mentioned herein could or may be changed by the current administration with or without prior notice. Okay, so the agenda, we have a lot to cover today, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to provide questions in the Q&A. I'll always, James will help me to manage that. And if there are questions, feel free and I'll stop and answer your questions. But we're going to cover, we already talked about what is the PTAC program. So we're going to go over government contracting and exactly what does that mean. How to determine if selling to the government is right for you and how to get started. The biggest one though, I think is the how to get started and marketing to the government, because it's different than the private sector, especially on the marketing side, and where to find bid opportunities and steps for success. And we'll take each one by one and go through it. So first, before we get started, I wanted to put together a quick little poll. James, can you help me with the poll?
Yeah, I've just gone and I've gone and launched it right now. So it's just a little poll. We want to see what our audience experience level is like. So no pressure here. Just let us know how you're feeling about your experience. Share with everyone.
Yeah, give us a help in understanding the attendees of this webinar. Where are they at with government contracting? Are you've never done it at all, or you've had some success, or you've tried?
Okay. All right, let's go and wrap it up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and end poll. Okay, I'll share results. Well, this is, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what you would expect, is that nice curve. Most people are at about 0, no experience, and then it's curving up, getting increasingly rarefied as more experience goes. So most of us are starting out, which makes a lot of sense. You are our target audience, but even if you are up in the 4 and 3, you can also get a lot out of what Thomas is offering today. So I'll step back out, but thanks, Thomas.
Oh, no, thank you. Okay, great. So the way I would provide a clear definition of government contracting is any entity that utilizes taxpayer dollars to provide services to the community is a government entity that qualifies for essentially government contracting. And here is a pretty good list that kind of gives you a really good overview of the industries that are right for government contracting versus those that normally are not utilized in the government contracting arena. Of course, construction, architecture, and engineering is one of the big ones, which is combined with public works, which usually means road, bridges, things like that. And then, of course, professional services is everything related to consulting, marketing, development. The government needs assistance when it comes to professional services like accounting, attorneys, because the government entities, they rely on the private sector to provide them with the information and services they need to do their job effectively. And of course, the other services of janitorial, medical supply, these are some of the big ones, of course, defense. And then on the other side, the ones that are not used that often, and the ones, when you look at this, it's mostly retail, and the reason retail doesn't really apply for government contracting is because overall, the government is doing their best to make sure the dollars spent are going towards services and products at the best and lowest possible cost. Now, that doesn't always work out, and we know over the years the government has wasted money, but overall, their mission is to purchase products and services at the best cost or lowest cost, which means that they're not going to be utilizing retail establishments, mostly wholesale, distributors, and directly from the manufacturer. Any questions on what I've just covered?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A at this time.
Okay, thank you.
But do just a reminder that you can enter questions in the Q&A at any time, and we'll address them once Thomas is ready.
This is a really good slide. I like this slide because it really shows just what one entity can purchase over the course of a year. This is a larger state institution here in California. And as you look through the list, it covers so many different types of service providers and products. And so this is a good idea to show you what almost any agency, whether it's a school district or a water district, even the other public works, that provide services for your community, many of them will need some of these services at some point. Now, when we talk about the contracting structure for large projects, this is where a lot of misinformation comes out. So a government agency is tasked with building a new building, right? They're going to build a new 6-story building as an example. They're not going to break up each part of that work so that, let's say, smaller firms have an opportunity to do these different types of work. It's going to be awarded to a larger firm that's going to offer them the best price for the construction of that building. And then it's up to the prime to reach out and work with subcontractors. The government agency puts usually a requirement on the prime to do this, but that's the way the work flows. So a lot of times when small businesses are looking for, especially in the construction area, they want to do business with BART or a school district, or they're one of the state agencies. And they reach out directly to the agency asking questions about a large project. They're going to refer them back to the prime contractor because they're the ones that ultimately will be hiring you for that work to do work with that prime contractor. Oh, sorry, okay, there we go. So here is a overview or recipe for success to see that if you're really ready to do business with government contracts. First of all, being an established business is really important. When I interview contracting officers or buyers or procurement officers, different titles for them, one of the main things that they always stress is they really need to look for firms that have established themselves already in their business. Meaning, if you've never done work with any other company and you're looking to get your first contract or your first job with your business with the government, that's going to be a very, very difficult challenge. They want to see past performance. It's very important that they see that you've done work in the past with some other, and it could be a private company. It doesn't have to be another government agency, but they need to know that you've done work in the past. Also, your business plan. Does your business plan include government contracting when you start putting it together? A quick example, not to go off tangent, but just a real quick example. I've got a client who is located here in San Francisco, and they are a manufacturer of a hot sauce. And they decided early when they were setting up their business plan that they didn't want to compete directly with all the other companies that make hot sauce and are sold in stores. They didn't want to compete with them. They wanted to find a way to sell directly to the consumer without having to deal with grocery stores, as an example. And so they turned to government contracting, and they realized that the institutions, for example, that one slide that dealt with Pelican Bay, every institution has its own commissary, its own little small grocery store just for the inmates. And there's somebody in charge of selecting what products could be sold to the inmates directly through their own store. So he reached out to Norcal PTAC to help him figure out how to find these buyers. And through that, he now is, on the road to doing more business with first the state. Now he's going to transition to the federal government institutions. And that's leading him into going after work with the Air Force and the Navy, because they all have their own commissaries. So that's a good example of how he incorporated government contracting in the beginning into his business plan. The next one is financial stability. And the reason this is important because in the private sector, many times when you sell something, you get paid immediately. In the government sector, it doesn't work that way. You could wait anywhere from 30, 45, 60, up to 90 days for payment after you provide services. And that can be a really big challenge and hurdle for a lot of businesses just getting into government contracting. So it's important to bear that in mind and understand that that is a hurdle that you have to be prepared for before you start going after government contracts. I already covered past performance, and marketing research is also part of that business plan process. You know, you want to know who in the government is buying. Now, as we covered, it could be hundreds of different government entities that are right for your product or service. But because you are I'm assuming most small businesses have a limited amount of marketing dollars and marketing resources, i.e. people. A lot of times it's the owner that has to do all of the marketing, whether it's via email, social media, phone calls, face-to-face. And so there's a limitation. There's a limitation on how many different agencies you can reach out to on a weekly, monthly basis. So it's important to narrow your focus. Instead of trying to cast a wide net, you want to look and see who you really should be doing business with and why, and really limit your focus, which will increase your opportunity for sales. And then finally, your e-commerce or your website, you want to make sure that it also is directed towards the government, at least one page, like one landing page. And we'll go over that more within this webinar. Next, how to get started. Well, of course, the first thing you want to do is really sign up for PTAC Assistance. There's so many ways we can help you that we've already covered. Now, getting the DUNS number. Recently, the federal government has stopped the practice of utilizing a DUNS number as a way to verify the validity of the information from a business that wants to do business with the federal government. So they've created their own number, which is a UEI number. However, the DUNS is still applicable for state, cities, counties, also with prime contractors. They still, look at and view the DUNS number as something of value. So it's still worth to have a DUNS number. It's just not going to be utilized on the federal side. Next is the NAICS codes and the UNSPSC codes. Just to make things a little bit more complicated. So the federal government has a method of figuring out industries, right? I'll give you one example in the construction industry. There are so many hundreds of different subsets of services and products under construction. And so the NAICS codes is a five or six digit set of numbers that help identify a very particular industry or service or product within that industry. And most entities, all the federal agencies, and many of the cities, counties, they also use NAICS codes to identify products and services in industries. However, the state of California utilizes a UNSPSC set of codes. They're the same in that they do the same job, but it's a 9-digit set of numbers instead of the 5 or 6 with the NAICS codes. You also, if you want to do business with California, you need to register on Cal eProcure. You want to go ahead and get your bidder's ID number, which only takes about an hour. It's very easy to get to register and sign up on Cal eProcure. You also want to register on sam.gov, which gives you access to doing business with the federal government. This is where NorCal PTAC really comes into play, because a lot of people need some assistance in going through the registration process on sam.gov. It can be very confusing. Within the sam.gov, you also have the dynamic small business search. And within that, you need to give them information on your firm's capability narrative. You know, maybe like a 500-word description of what you do, how well you do it. Give me, talk about your history. Here's where you can really talk about your company. And trust me, buyers within the federal government utilize the dynamic small business search when they are looking for firms that can provide them with products and services. It also gives you a chance to use keywords, because the buyers within the federal government do use keywords to help narrow their search and find businesses that can provide them with the products and services. And of course, your past performance. And then finally, you want to create a capability statement. This is like a business card for a small business or for all businesses that want to do business with any government entity or with prime contractors. Everybody wants to see your capability statement when you first reach out to them. So it's a very important document, and we'll actually cover that more as we move forward. And then again, make sure your website is government friendly, and we'll cover that more. Any questions in the Q&A yet, James? I don't believe there are, right?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay.
Feel free to ask away. We'll have more time to talk.
Here's another area that gets a lot of confusion. I have a lot of clients that say, well, I need to get my certification so I can win government contracts. And I always want to correct them and say, it's not a need. It definitely is a tool that opens doors for you, but you don't need a certification to win contracts. But it definitely does open doors. So it is a tool that you should have, but don't consider it all. All you have to do is get a certification, and then contracts will come your way. It does not work that way. However, it will help open doors. It will help the process when you do your marketing to government agencies. So within the state of California, there's only 3 certifications. You have the small business, you have the small business for public works, which is, again, mostly construction. And then you have the disabled veteran business enterprise. That's it. Within the federal side, though, it's expanded greatly. And so you have, of course, the self-certifying small business, which when you fill out your SAM registration, there is a section within SAM that helps you identify the kind of business you are. It asks for your NEX codes. It asks, okay, so if your NEX code is, and I'm just going to use construction again as an example, 54123, it's going to let you know that businesses who make an annual gross revenue of 20 million or over are not considered small business. So if you are doing 10 million and under, technically you are still considered a small business, and you're self-certifying yourself as a small business. All of these other certifications, the women-owned small business, veteran-owned small business, the Hub Zone, the 8A, and the DBE, you all have to apply for those to receive those kind of certifications. So any questions on that? The small business certification with the federal government, you are self-certifying. And then all the other certifications, you have to apply to receive those certifications. All right, go to the next slide. Local contracting. So talks about a great way to get your feet wet. I would also say there are thousands of firms that only do business with local entities, and they do very well. So I'm not saying that, you can do both local and the federal government, because, the federal government spends $600 billion on businesses within the United States in terms of products and services. but you can do great work with your local government. Again, we're talking city, county, school districts, transportation agencies. Yes, it does definitely help you gain past performance. But again, what's important is the relationships and talking to local agencies to figure out what they need and how your business can be set up to work with them so that you have an edge against your competition. And yes, typically local agencies do use their own procurement systems. And Norcal PTAC, we have a really great website that shows you links directly to the cities, the counties, and the transportation agencies that operate here in Northern California. Any questions so far? Okay, so now we're going to go back and talk about the capability statement, the business plan for your, the business card. It's like a business card for your business. So the resume, this is an important document that has a lot of information. And actually on the next slide, I'm going to show you a template for what that looks like. But you want to make it brief, concise, but you want to really be clear on your products and services, your past performance, your codes, your contact information, any photos, key clients. All of this is spelled out very clearly to make it very easy for the contracting officers, the buyers, to see exactly who you are, what you do, and why they should reach out to you, or why they should even be interested in your company. It's the first thing that they see that tells them you either are a professional or you're unprofessional. It tells them that you're ready to do business with the government or you are not ready to do business with the government. So this is a really important document. Here's the example that we, and I personally do share with all of my clients. Now, if this is too daunting, it's a Word document, so anything can be customized. But if this feels daunting for my clients, I also show them on the internet where they can find multiple templates. So this is not the only template that's available. There are thousands of templates out there on the internet. The other thing we've talked about is making sure your website is designed to highlight that you are looking for and ready to do business with government. So of course, your website needs to be updated and relevant. You should have a government tab or a government page. And within that page, you want to have your capability statement being able to be downloaded with a link. You want to also show your registrations and any certifications, have your NAICS codes and your UNSPSC codes. Those are the codes I was talking about that just the state of California uses. Your past performance and any recent projects highlighted and easy to navigate. Trust me, the buyers within these agencies, if they're interested in your company, they will definitely check out your website. So here's a really big portion of this, marketing to the government, right? There are many ways to market to the government. I'll give you an example. I have clients who they do spend most of their energy looking through databases to find the newest bids that come out from different agencies. And when these bids come out, they do the work of putting in the best bid they can. Other clients of mine, they do the work of building relationships before the bids come out. They want to know everything they can about those agencies. You know, if they're in the construction business, I mean, play with the construction industry again, they want to know what kind of projects they have coming out in the next 6 months to 12 months. They want to know who's going to be in charge. They want to know what the budget's going to be. So there's a lot of upfront work that they do to find out as much as they can so that they're ready when an RFP or a notice that the government needs to purchase something is going to come out, and they're ready. Now, here we're talking about some of the different ways that you can market to them, find the buyers, find the managers and decision makers within government. Out of this list, some of the ones that are, in my opinion, the most favorite are LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great site because almost all agencies, whether it's a city agency, the state, federal government, school districts, they now all have a LinkedIn page. And within that LinkedIn page, they will have the employees on that page. So you can find buyers, you can find managers, you can find the small business specialists that are working for an agency designed to kind of help small businesses do business with that agency, all within LinkedIn. Also networking directly, you know, examining their websites and really paying attention to the information on that agency's website. Gather as much information as you can, and then you can follow up by asking really good questions in phone calls and in emails. Any questions on marketing to the government? And we're going to go over more of this, but it's really important to understand how to market as opposed to just waiting on, let's say, a RFP or some kind of notice saying that they're going to need to purchase 5,000 of these products. Having some information about that agency, about their purchasing needs in advance is a great way to help you beat out the competition and have an advantage.
No questions in the Q&A, but I did get a private message asking about the slides and the hyperlinks. And just to note that all of these hyperlinks that you see, anything underlined, not on this page, but on other pages, these will all be live in the version of the slides that you get, and they'll be on our website this afternoon. So you'll have the slides to click through and find all these resources.
Excellent. Okay. So now, when you talk about building a list of upcoming bid opportunities, here are some of the biggest websites that are really out there that will help you do that job. So the local agency websites, for example, every school district, every county, city, the transportation agencies will all make sure that they have a page devoted to their procurement needs. And that's where you go directly to figure out what they're going to be purchasing. And that will also help you understand what they have purchased in the past. Prime contractor websites. So if you're looking to do business with a let me not use construction. Let me think of something else. But if you're looking to do business with a hotel, right? There's a major hotel on their website. They will have a section that talks about what their needs are going to be. Cal eProcure is the California website that lists their upcoming events, their upcoming opportunities. And then when it comes to SAM, SAM is the federal side. So SAM contracting is all the, well, I won't say all, but most federal contracting is listed on SAM. Not all of it though, but most of it is. We can get into how they use other entities to post or list their purchasing needs, but SAM by far is the most active. Acquisition.gov is a site that gives you forecast of the procurement activities of these federal agencies. So acquisition.gov is on the federal side. It won't give you information on local entities like cities, counties, and states, but it will provide detailed information on the federal side. And then again, associations. So it uses builder exchanges, but any association within your industry should also be a resource to finding bid opportunities. And then of course, Norcal PTAC, we have our own bid match service. I'll go into that a little bit more in detail, but basically we take your information, your keywords, and we help put together a profile. And then on a weekly basis, you're going to receive, actually it could be almost daily, depending on how many bids come out. But you'll get a list of the different bid opportunities that you are excited about based on the keywords that that you give us to work with. Uh-oh. My mouse is so sensitive. Okay, okay. We just covered this. Okay, so in summary, 10 steps to success. First of all, determining if you're ready for government contracting. Again, it's really important to go over this to make sure that you do have past performance. You want to make sure that if you opened up your business, let's say 6 months ago, and you're still struggling looking for your first real contract or work within any entity, you don't want government to be the very first contract because they're really hesitant to do business with an entity that doesn't have past performance. Applying for PTAC for services is a great help because we help you eliminate those initial mistakes that a lot of companies make when they're going after contracts and doing business with the government. Complete the getting started checklist. Yes, very important. Getting certified is important, but again, it's not the all to be all. You still have a lot of work to do, but it is definitely an important tool that you should definitely utilize. Creating your capability statement and updating your website are definites, and then start the process of building relationships with the agencies that you want to do business with. Locating bid opportunities, and then practicing how to bid, right? That's a whole webinar in itself on just how to put together quality bids that ultimately we will win contracts. So signing up for services, this is our team here at Norcal PTAC. And we have upcoming events.
Yeah, I can just go over those real briefly.
Oh, okay.
Just next week, we've got the Earth Day event with the California Water Resources and California Parks and Recreation. We have a cool little thing we wanted to do, thematic, on Friday, April 22nd. One of the only webinars that we do on Friday, so tell your friends if they're available on that date. Should be interesting. And then we're going to do a certifications for veteran-owned businesses webinar. So if you're a veteran or know anyone who's in the small business world, please take a look at that. And then if you are a woman who owns a small business, Woman-Owned Small Business Certification Overview. That's the WOSB. And pop quiz, if you remember from Thomas's presentation, that is a federal certification. So that is on May 5th, and that's just a smattering. We've got a bunch more events. We've got events with the California DGS. We got all kinds of more intro webinars coming out. So please do stay tuned. You can find all of these and more. Again, this is just 3 of them on our website, norcalptac.org/calendar. And you'll be able to click on these links as well when you get the slides. But it's pretty easy to navigate our calendar. I'll drop it in the chat here. We do have a couple of questions, so let's go ahead and get to them. Yeah. Folks warmed up enough to break out of their shell. All right, Kenji is asking, are government entities required to interview women-owned, minority-owned, and disadvantaged business?
Are they required to interview them?
I'm not sure what Kenji means exactly by that, but I maybe perhaps consider or
So yes, so let me say it this way. The federal government, also the state of California, most states, and even many cities and counties, they do have I guess a requirement but they have a goal. They have a goal of reaching and doing business with so many small businesses based on their budget. As an example, the federal government, as I said before, I think I said, what was it? 600, I think it's 600 billion. And that might, you know, we're not gonna, but anyways, let's say it's around $600 billion. Out of that total number, they want, their goal is 25% going to small business. But what they won't do is they won't say, out of that 25%, 10% has to be women-owned, or 5% has to be 8A, or 10% has to be a hub zone or veteran. As long as they reach the goal of 25% of their total spend is going to small business, that's what they're looking for. And within that classification of small business are the women-owned certified businesses, are the veteran-owned certified businesses, are the hub zones. So they do have a goal, and they are serious about the goal. They employ people whose job is to make sure that their department or their agency is reaching that goal. And that's normally the small business advocate or small business specialist.
Maybe could you say something about set-asides as well? Because I know there are set-asides for women-owned businesses.
Sure. So set-asides are one of the main ways that they reach their goal of 20% or 25% of their total spend on small business. So what they'll do is an agency will say, okay, this type of work will be set aside just for women-owned small businesses. And only a women-owned small business can do that, can receive that contract. Now, understand, there are thousands of women-owned small businesses that you're still competing with. Just like there's thousands of veteran-owned small businesses who are competing for those set-asides just for veteran-owned businesses. Same with Hub Zone and same with small businesses. There's always competition, but the competition is limited because there's a set-aside just for a certain classification of small business.
Right, so maybe that gets to Kenji's question, that there are some situations where they'll put out an opportunity that is required to be.
Yeah, within the SAM that I was talking about, you could do a search just on set-asides for women-owned small businesses, and then utilizing the NAICS codes will help identify exactly what you do. And are there any set-asides coming out within any government entity based on the kind of work you're looking to do?
Great. All right, we got a thanks from Kenji. Kenji, thanks for the excellent question. That is a great question. Ara Vasquez is asking, does the California government buy only from California-based businesses? So if I'm located in a different state, can I still bid?
The answer is yes. California buys all over the world. California is I want to say the 6th or 7th largest economy in the world. So companies from all over the world want to do business in California. So if an RFP comes out or a bid notice comes out for something that's valued at $2 million, as an example, they're going to receive bids from entities all over the United States and possibly other countries. And the qualification is you have to sign up on Cali Procure, right? Cali Procure is the starting point to get your bid number within the California. And then after that, it's putting together the best bid. So yes, you can be anywhere in the United States and do business in California.
In order to be certified with the California SB,
To be certified,
you
no.
need to be located in California.
You have to be located in California. Yes.
I might give you a head up there, but
yeah.
Okay.
And that applies even on the county, so wherever you're located within that county or city, they more than likely will have some kind of certification or classification just for local businesses. And when we talk about certifications and classifications, what does that really mean in the long run? Here's an example. Let's say I'm a certified small business in the state of California, and I'm bidding on a contract where the total value, meaning the budget that they want to spend on this product or service, is $100,000. And my bid is $90,000. Let's say you are not a certified, you're not a certified small business or DVBE within California, and your bid is $89,000. So technically, you should win the bid because your bid is $1,000 less. My certification comes into play because I get a 5% preference. So my bid is actually going to be viewed 5% more. So I will outbid you. I'll win the bid, but they're going to pay me. Did I do that correctly? They're going to pay me at the higher bid that I put in. So if I put in this, so let's say I put in 90, you put in 89. You're supposed to win because you're $1,000 less, but because of my certification, I get that preference and I can win that, and they'll pay me at the $90,000 bid. Hopefully I didn't totally confuse you guys with that. But there's a preference, right? And the preference is on the actual bid.
All right, well, that exhausts our questions. We're getting a lot of thanks here. Folks are happy to have the assistance, and Thomas, it really was quite a helpful presentation, so thanks a lot. When you leave the webinar, you'll be redirected towards a survey. That survey is it's gonna have a couple questions. You can answer them anonymously if you'd like. Just let us know how you felt about the webinar today. We always want to be improving our services. Like I said, we do all of this at no cost to you. You didn't pay anything to join the webinar. You won't pay anything to become a client if you're in our service area and eligible. So we do hope to see your applications in our queue. We're all friendly folks and we're here to help. So go ahead and you can reach out to us. Email, phone number you have on the slides here. I might be the one picking up the phone. So, and you might be able to work with Thomas if you like. So thank you again. If you're not in our service area, do yourself a favor and find your local PTAC before just clicking on our link, because if you're in San Bernardino County, Los Angeles, if you're in Virginia, somewhere else, then we will have to reject your application, send you somewhere else. So, but there are 96 PTACs across the country, so a lot of PTACs all over the world. So
Definitely.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, let's go ahead and wrap it up today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thanks again to Thomas. And we'll see you at future webinars.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.